You're listening to Hollywood Inclusive on the Good Talk Podcast Network.
Coming up today on Hollywood Inclusive,
we talk about Doctor Strange and Marvel casting.
And casting in general. We look at an article in USA Today that assigns a report card to the networks.
We also talk about Lil Wayne, Susan Sarandon, and political endorsements.
And our guest today has more than 20 years experience in the television industry and now consults on the creation of new networks. Coming up
on Hollywood Inclusive.
Hollywood Inclusive. Hollywood Inclusive.
Hollywood Inclusive.
Hear all the voices.
Hello and welcome. You found Hollywood Inclusive. My name is Darren.
And this is Kirk.
Hello. And we have with us a wonderful guest. This is DMA joining us today. Hello. How are you?
Hello. I am great and I'm really excited to be here.
We're excited to have you here. She is an executive consultant with a long history in television and technology, and we'll get into it in segment 2, but a mind-bendingly extensive career as far as I'm concerned. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
We're going to start out today with our top story, and that is...
So our top story, we're going to talk a little bit about Doctor Strange and also Marvel heads Kevin Feige. I got the name right?
That was it, Kevin Feige.
So I got the name right. And there was an article in Vulture where, they were discussing, that Marvel is ready to move completely away from all-white cast, and they were going to start to diversify their movies even more. And I think we've started to see it, when casting Zendaya in Spider-Man and, with Black Panther. So I guess my question, I don't think I have a question. I don't have a question, actually. Because then there was another article, or what was it, interview?
So there's an interview that was published in Daily Beast with the writer was named Jen Yamato, and she did an interview with the director of the show, of Doctor Strange. Now, I haven't seen Doctor Strange. Is it out yet?
No, it's
coming
not.
out this weekend?
I think it comes out in like a week or
soon.
two.
We're starting to see an awful lot of commercials.
Yes.
And she sat down with the director, and she said, okay, you're talking for the first time, basically. Let's address this sucker. And what was interesting was that his response was pretty contrite and pretty...
And that response, Darren, I know we don't have a word for word. But,
Well, yeah, so let's back up a little bit and make sure everybody knows what's going on here. Because if you're a listener to the show, you've heard us discuss this every once in a while, but we've never specifically gone straight into this particular story. As it happens, there's a fairly amount of quote-unquote whitewashing going on in casting lately, in particular of Asian American or Asian characters being cast with white actors. There's been a fair trend. Probably the most offensive one is Scarlett Johansson
in Ghost in the Shell, right? Because we talked about that, right?
Yeah. So we've mentioned it from time to time, but we've never really gotten specifically into it. Now, in the case of Doctor Strange, this is a comic book adaptation. It's like Marvel comic book adaptation movie number. I don't know what number we're on now.
We started with Iron Man, right?
Well,
kind of.
So, gosh, if you want to go even further back into the story, you have to understand that Marvel was hurting financially. I don't know if they were dealing with bankruptcy, but they were in trouble. Mm-hmm. So they sold the rights to a couple different characters, including Spider-Man and all the X-Men. And that's why you have Spider-Man movies coming out of Sony now, and X-Men movies coming out of Fox, I believe.
Okay.
So...
You know so much about this.
I don't. It's just
so much more than
every time we talk about comic books on the show, you point at me and go, I don't know comic books, you talk.
But then you apparently answer the question in alarming detail.
I'm not going to be able to this time because I don't know Doctor Strange. Because here's the thing. So what Marvel has done really well is they have taken their set of characters and spun them out in a way that allowed you to know other characters.
Right.
So, honestly, I feel like if you went back in history 15 or 20 years, people could say, well, there's Spider-Man and there's Captain America and the Incredible Hulk, right? That was my lunchbox in the 80s. And I'm not kidding.
Wow.
That was exactly my lunchbox. And I loved that lunchbox. But, so what they did really well was they took the characters that they had and used them to kind of launch other characters out.
Right.
Now, Iron Man wasn't particularly well known, but they did a really good job of casting for one thing.
Hey, and the first
Absolutely.
movie was actually like really good.
And the cast in the first movie was really, really good. And every time we talk about it on the show, I always forget the director's name. Swingers. I always want to say Jeremy, but that's not his name.
John
Favreau. Thank you. So John Favreau directed that and knocked it out of the park in terms of getting a story that was accessible and an adaptation of the source material. He did a great job. Robert Downey Jr. was inspired casting.
Absolutely.
And he nails the sort of personality quirks. What Marvel's good at is superheroes who aren't just, I'm Superman, I have all the tools to solve the job, right? They usually have issues. Iron Man, famously, his issue is he has substance abuse problems. So that, to me, was the masterstroke of Robert Downey Jr. He could actually get into the character.
Right.
Now, none of the movies has used that in any way. They didn't go there.
I'd actually be curious if there are any interviews with him that really where he speaks
early
to that,
on.
Because I'd be very curious to
I would
see if that was
think-
part of that original conversation.
Right.
If you were starting, I would think you would have to have, made that part of it. I think really what they've concentrated on is sort of the Tony Stark swagger.
Yes.
Which Robert Downey Jr. embodies
really
quite well. So once they had, they'd taken a property that wasn't really well known to everybody, and then they started to say, okay, well, if we could pull this off with Iron Man,
now we can pull it off with Thor.
right?
And
Sure.
We've
the
got
Avengers and-
50 years worth of
Right.
characters that people sort of know. What if we can, introduce them and roll them out? And then,
Right.
and then you see things like, okay, we want to make a Black Panther movie.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's ever heard of Black Panther, but how can we do that? I know. Let's put him in Captain America 3, right?
Right.
And let's let him
out.
kick some ass and save the day, so that people are stoked for the next movie.
So I'm because I guess I'm going to kind of take it back to the article, because I guess I'm kind of two minds in this. I was telling Darren earlier that I saw, I didn't see anything. I was listening to an interview with Norman Lear about the way that he, would spin off, and he almost was like, he didn't really want to call it a spin off. He took, like, for example, in Maude, he found that the Esther Roll character he was like, she was a star. Mm-hmm. So he was like, I had to build a show around her, and I knew I wanted to. So he was like, we gave her a husband, and he was like, and now we had a couple that we can now spin off into a new show. Mm-hmm. And then he talked about how sort of like the Jeffersons were an answer to a lot of the sort of kind of blowback or like protest that he was getting from like black publications. And he even said, I think like the Black Panthers and like Stokely Carmichael like came to him and was like, hey, we don't like this, we want something else. And then because the George Jefferson character was established on
The Family,
then it was easy to take that, and now he had another, like a different view of the black family. And so it's interesting to think about that and to hear like when you talk about these Marvel characters, how they start with these, I guess none of them are major characters, because like you said, like Iron Man wasn't really big. I don't know how big. I know Thor only from Adventures of Babysitting.
Right.
So like that's where,
Well, but you laugh, but I bet that's part of why Thor got a movie before, say, Ant-Man, Like,
I will say I grew up reading specifically Thor comic books because I was a huge Thor fan. Might have been Chris that got that movie made, just finding anything to put that man into. When you throw a cape and boots on him. So I'm going to just go another, possible angle into that.
But
That
I
makes
mean, I
sense.
just feel like you could have put any man with a six-pack and just put a thing on his head, and they would have gone to see.
I think that's true, but I also think there's a difficulty in our main character is a god. Like, you have to have a certain degree of like confidence married with not vulnerability, but like
Accessibility. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, I know your line on the kind of like, look, don't give us that BS about diversity that you need a star in order to launch, a vehicle that already has a name to it. I think that makes sense. But and as much as like anything that's an established franchise can be launched with any good actor, there's still like
certain characteristics.
Yeah, but you got to have a really good actor who really fits a part,
right,
in order for it to like, be a big hit.
So I guess let's get it back to the Doctor Strange,
right?
Sure.
So the point of the story was Doctor Strange is fairly obscure in terms of like comic book characters. So I'm not a comic book total dork. I watched my fair share of whatever cartoon came on, and Doctor Strange was always sort of this like Deus Ex Machina. If we need somebody to show up and bend the dimensions so that everything goes this away, that away, they would kind of do that, and then you'd never see him again, right? Like he would help if he felt like it, and if it wasn't convenient for the plot, he would say something like, "Oh, the ways of the universe are too beyond my power," whatever they needed for him to say. He would either do or not do whatever the plot needed to be done, and not really somebody that you focus on as the like kind of main character.
Mm-hmm. So they make this movie, and then they cast
cast Tilda Swinton in the role of the Ancient One. And the Ancient One is essentially his mentor who helps him develop his powers. Mm-hmm. He goes from being a medical doctor to being a bender of the dimensions, and kind of a godlike character who can travel through whatever. And again, his powers is pretty much whatever the plot needs him to have the power to do.
Just so I'm understanding right, the Tilda Swinton character is like a Celtic something
in the movie, this is why it matters, because in the comic book source material, the character was meant to be Tibetan, and so they. This when this was getting made, everybody said, "Oh, cool! At least we'll have a top-billing Asian actor. There are so few." And when they made the decision to go with Tilda Swinton, that produced some outrage. That like, hey, we get so few characters, and we're watching Matt Damon save the Great Wall of China this year.
I really want to find the word that I would use, because outrage is maybe too emotional for something that people of color are so used to, as opposed to really critical blowback. And it's really like this isn't like a hurt feeling thing per se, or maybe I'm so offended thing per se. It's not surprising. It is the actual practice of Hollywood. The surprise would be, hey, let's actually put this person of color into this role. So I think the thing that keeps happening when the megaphone gets placed behind this is we're actually not going to let this pass. Every single time you do it, we're going to shine a light on this, because it's the only way to wear down the folks who continue to make similar decisions. Like if you go on Twitter, there's this hashtag I'm just obsessed with, and I'm the only one trying to make happen. It's my fetch. And it's just like...
Stop trying to make fetch happen.
And it's who was in the room. And a lot of times I'm just looking at ads. I'm just looking, there's all of these kind of famous, air quote, historical ads, like, that wonderful one where they've got the folks walking past the Big Mac billboard, and, and the line underneath the print ad says, I'd hit that. And you're like, wow, who was in the room that didn't tell you what that verb means? Because I don't want you to do that to a Big Mac. And if you do... I hope you're wearing protection. I see things like that, and it's not about, oh, how dare you do this. It's you are going to explain yourself yet again.
Yeah. Who
was in the room, and certainly on the performer side, on Tilda Swinton's side, who on her team said you should do that, and or said you shouldn't do that, and she went ahead to do that.
Well, really, so that's what's so interesting about this article, is because it actually gets to the point of the director of the movie, Scott Derrickson. And what he was thinking. I mean, the reporter basically says, "So, what were you thinking?"
Okay.
I'm rolling my eyes.
Yeah. Well, so he makes a good case. He makes a case where white people have not grown up understanding that they're not being seen on the screen, right? So he kind of says, "Geez, I didn't know about the pain." And what he says was he was trying to not do bad and wound up doing bad because of it. So his point is, if you look at the source material, if you go back to the 60s, the characters who surround Doctor Strange are his kind of mystic Fu Manchu type.
So they were stereotypical Asian
They
characters.
were stereotypical Asian characters.
And his solution is not to create a proud or extraordinary, complex, dynamic Asian character, but just to make it a white character.
So he did that with the other character. I'm relaying the story.
Because
Interesting.
So-
Chiwetel is in there and in that character is a white person in the comic books, right?
There's yes. So wait. Sorry, say it again.
Chiwetel, I always miss
No, so he's another character.
another character.
Yeah. And you're right, but
the
that guy
race-
is normally white. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's like 5 characters. There's him, there's Rachel McAdams, who, according to what I've seen so far, is they say is kind of underused in the movie.
Oh.
Then there's the character's name is Wong and the actor's name is Wong, B.D. Wong.
B.D.
right.
Wong.
Yeah, who's great.
Wow. Yeah.
Has anybody watched Netflix? Here's another example. It's called Marco Polo. It should be freaking called, Genghis Khan or whatever it is.
I have not.
It's
watched
all about ancient Chinese politics, and they stuck a white guy in the middle of it to be able to do it. But it's like, stop showing me the white guy. What's he even doing there? He doesn't belong there. And obviously it was a historical character who was going,
Sure.
doing trading and stuff like that. But it's so like the series is misnamed based on what they spend their time on. Anyway, side rant.
I want to go back into his explanation because, and I actually don't know that he makes a good case, but he does explain himself.
Right.
And that's interesting. I think that what remains a challenge in mainstream Hollywood, right, and invites us to really get very serious about alternative, platforms, and may I add the success of platforms like Netflix, where they really are putting things out like Luke Cage, things that could not ever possibly be greenlit by a broadcast, or even mainstream cable network, and they're seeing their numbers.
Right.
At some point, you do stop and say, year after year, project after project, it's not even about what was your decision making process in this micro moment, but why are you absolutely either not listening or feeling it doesn't apply to you when you do listen, when you make those decisions without diverse input. And that's why I keep going back to who was in the room.
Right.
Because if you decide sitting alone, at your desk, that's why, because that sounds like what he's saying. It was his kind of choice, as opposed to saying, wow, who else can I kind of bring in and bounce this idea off of? Well, I just don't know any other industry that works that way, where that it's that insular and you're making decisions that can cost you that much.
And I think that was
brand
definitely a big
equity.
part of their problem. Exactly what you're saying, that they so we've got Kevin Feige in the one article saying we're committed to this, and
Right.
They after 18 movies of one thing, they finally, maybe we can, make some money the other way. So there is a degree to which, they're making some change, maybe a little too late, or the right amount too late.
The wrong focus too late, because it's not about adding people of color to the film or adding women to the film. It's about actually creating films that are representative of the real world with complex characters, and not requiring that those characters only be of a certain race and gender. Because that's really what we're looking at. It's not saying let's add some chocolate chips to the cookie, right? For the sake of having a chocolate chip cookie.
I like that expression.
Hey, there's a lot of applications. You'll hear it again. You'll hear it again in segment 2. It's like, oh, there should be chocolate in the cookie. It's like, no. It's like, we have been just having snickerdoodles for 50 years.
Yeah.
And aren't we a little tired of the taste of snickerdoodles? And what if we had an oatmeal cookie and all of the rich texture that goes with that, and really honored and represented it as complex and real characters, not bloop, we dropped it in and it's going to melt and leave chocolate on my thumb. Wow.
I admire your commitment to the metaphor.
I really stuck to it.
Listen, and I think we can close it on that. We can end it on that metaphor.
Well, I do want to, I mean, it is beautiful, but to finish the thought, because we didn't quite say everything that's in the article.
Right.
So again, Scott Derrickson, what he was saying, not in his defense, because what's interesting is, so he says, okay, look, there were two Asian characters. They were both horrible stereotypes. One was the mystic on the mountain that the white dude went over and learned from, and the other was the house servant. They took the house servant, they reinvented him as Doctor Strange's intellectual superior. They made him, I want to say, a librarian or something, So they did take that one character and say, okay, we're not going to pull off the terrible stereotype over here. We're going to make sure there's an interesting character to be had. And then for the other character, they said, okay, we're going to make her kind of androgynous, timeless. She's a mythical creature, so we're going to get away from the Asian stereotypes there. So they kind
Which one is the bigger character?
Oh, she is.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the problem. I'm
So-
almost positive. I'm almost positive that she's the
physicalities. I'm shrugging my shoulders right now. Like, interesting.
I mean, listen.
And then what he goes on to say, I'm gonna complete
that's
my white dude over explain. He goes on to say that it's on him that diversity in movies comes down to the director. He says he didn't understand that this was as big a deal as it was, and then what he says is like, we're hoping for a $70 million open. If that doesn't happen because people are upset about this choice that we made, so be it. And honestly, I support that. So he's kind of saying, if this misstep that we made hurts the movie, then that needs to happen, because change isn't going to happen any other way.
Got it. And
it's probably a completely, like, some PR people helped him go into the interview. Who knows? I don't know, as you say, who was in the room.
So now you consult people in the room.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a misstep. It's a deliberate choice.
Yeah.
Right? A deliberate, uninformed choice. And so the consequences are what the consequences are. Now I'll get into maybe the meta of the industry and inclusion, is that if you can that kind of cavalierly say, well, if it costs us $70 million, that's a good lesson for us, because you're going to get another movie anyway, even if you've cost the studio $70 million. That's a bigger conversation, maybe not for tonight.
Yeah.
It's like, how awesome for you. How awesome for you.
Yes.
I can't get a $2 million movie as a typical filmmaker, so that's, wowzers.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, that's well said. And
Better
on
than the cookie.
that's where we're going to end this segment.
Yeah, there we go.
Hollywood Inclusive listeners, we know you love movies, and we're going to make going to the movies easier for you. Do you like discounts? Do you like popcorn for free? Yeah, you do. Go to our website, click on ads, and look for the banner for Deal Flicks. You could save up to 60% off movie ticket deals, and who isn't going to love something like that? Do it today. Help support this podcast.
All right, and we are back with DMA.
Hi, DMA.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming in, joining us here in the I don't even know what to call it. Studio?
We'll call it. We got
yeah.
mics in here, and we got sound surround. It's a studio.
Cavernous discotheque.
Cavernous discotheque. We want people to use their imagination for where we are. Welcome to the Cavernous discotheque. We won't really add echoes to the end, but we could. So I'll start with a little bit of your bio so that everybody knows your wonderful story, and then you'll tell us a lot more about it. Sure. You are an executive consultant, a speaker, an author in media and technology. You were, for 5 years, you were a VP of development at BET. Mm-hmm. And, as that division head, you did a bunch of shows,
yes.
Including and especially Real Husbands of Hollywood.
Yes.
I pointed out because I'm a comedy guy.
Yay.
You founded Hollywood Diversity Network at hollywooddiversity.org. And, as if a 20-year career in TV, doing reality television, and you've written some other stuff as well, as if that wasn't enough, you also own technology patents for fintech and edtech. That's financial budgeting calendar software. So you had...
For one of them.
For one of them.
Yes.
Okay.
The other one is the education technology software.
Right. Because get off the couch, why don't you, DMA?
I'm exhausted.
And also, and you should be, because on top of that, you're also the author of 3 different books on writing, pitching, and producing, including the show starter reality TV Made Simple System. And the interesting tidbit I dug up, you wrote the first story structure system that was built into Final Draft.
Well, I wrote a book that became the first
Okay.
story structure system that was integrated into Final Draft. And it's still there. It's Final Draft 10. You can still use the 135 system to set up your screenplays.
I mean, yeah. So screenwriters everywhere, people starting right now, leaning on Final Draft to help them with their story structure a little bit. You're one of the people who says, yeah, make stories this way.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic.
Well, and I do it, and the other book as well, so much of what I do, my point of view is I was a buyer, I was a gatekeeper.
Okay.
And so what can I offer in terms of a game plan that is not coming from the same side of the table as a fellow creative? Though that's where I started. So when I'm talking about get a game plan, I'm always thinking about what was the reason I had to tell you no? And what do
Okay.
I need to put out into my blogs, put out into my website, put into the books, my panels and speaking engagements, so that you get a yes? Because there
Right.
really is a defined path. There really is a defined path for success in entertainment for a lot of folks, but we don't always illuminate it, and that's really a goal for me.
That's fantastic.
nice.
Hey.
So tell us about your sort of how you got to start. Are you
sure.
from Southern California originally, or?
Well, yes, from north of here.
Okay.
But I went to school, I went to college up in the Bay Area at Stanford, and when I graduated, I was on my way for an illustrious career in politics. So you see, that did not work out at all.
I know you really went to Stanford, by the way. I'm a Stanford grad as well.
Yay!
Because we always say, oh, I went to school in the Bay Area.
It's so true.
Because we don't want to have to deal with the...
The Berkeleyites?
Well,
Sorry to
Yeah.
all the Cal Bears.
no, you're not.
No, you know I went to Stanford because you see my statue when you go back up to campus, and you're like, I have seen that girl before.
You have a statue?
No, that's a Rodin sculpture, but it looks surprisingly.
He was like, wait a minute, hold on. Okay, wait. So, wait. You have a statue.
The Stanford campus has a Rodin sculpture garden with
As it should.
It's like the largest collection of Rodin sculpture outside of
France.
Paris. Yeah. So there's a hell of a lot of it. And
Yes.
as a student there, you both respect and disrespect it over the course of your... I had picnics there and dates there.
People like lean up against it and study. You know,
Okay.
it's
Right.
it's
Right.
interesting.
Right.
You're not again the air quotes.
But I did not place you as one of the statues off the top of my head, but I believe you. I want to look it up now. Anyway, so you went to school up there in the Bay Area.
Yeah. So to make a really long story short, I ended up not really, once I moved into the profession that I had studied for, feeling it was a match for me.
Yeah.
And having wonderful mentors who said, you know, this is, you know, you're right. If you have a very strong conviction about the world and how you think that things should unfold in it, you know, politicians aren't there to push their agenda forward. They're there to represent their constituents. And I had an agenda. So I did a massive shift, basically because I had no other options. And I became a model.
Okay.
And I was a runway girl overseas and in New York. And then that moved me into a world where a lot of other doors were opening. So once I was in New York, you know, I began acting again, which I'd done all through college, and got my union cards, and then was dissatisfied with the opportunities I had there because, you know, as an African American woman in late 80s, early 90s, you know, the roles were not as diverse as they. Oh, wait a minute. So anyway.
I love the shade. Oh, nice. Oh.
I'm like a tree on a sunny day. And so, then I started writing for myself, became a playwright, and then was doing a musical. And then, so I applied for the Disney Fellowship. So when I think about what specifically got me started in television, it was what I believed was going to be a 1-year fellowship and then back to New York to become, a theatrical luminary as a playwright. But I really fell in love with television, and those fellowship programs really are such accelerators because not just the training that you get, but the extraordinary blessed access that you get. And so from there, became a reader at a production company through a college friend, actually, at a really amazing job there, and then writer on a kids show from an executive I'd met when I was at Disney, and then that just moved into kind of chance meetings and doors opening. Writer, producer, showrunner, got my own production company, delivered my first show successfully, and then really was looking at the rest of my career, and this was unscripted. So these are, 14, 15, 17-hour days. It's 7 days a week. Mm-hmm. The only thing you do as a production company is scale. And that's what your life's going to look like for the next 10 years. And it wasn't for me. It was not for me. And that was conveniently 2006, 2007. So I...
significant number. Everybody listening, what was that?
Social media took off, and I read a book by Thomas Friedman called The World is Flat. And it just talked about what it meant. That we had this extraordinary internet experience and we had access to each other. I'm looking at YouTube, I'm looking at MySpace, and I just said, I can solve a lot of the problems in our industry and in my personal commitment, which is to education and college access, if I shift into technology.
Nice.
And then that brought me back to being an executive when a network actually subscribed to my software. And then that brought me to international networks, and that, and so I'm a consultant. I've been a consultant for about over 10 years, and then now I've moved a little away from content consulting and programming consulting and much more into organizational and leadership consulting, because at some point, if you don't have an organization in which content can thrive, because there aren't workflows and infrastructures and culture that allows that to happen, then everyone is kind of wasting their time. So now I help companies create cultures in which content can be created.
Nice.
That makes sense. Did I just...
No, I'm listening. I'm just taking it all in. I'm just looking at you and listening.
I think the summary, for everybody who's listening...
Is there going to be a cookie analogy here?
We'll come back to the cookie. I want to hear more about the cookie. But for everybody who's listening, because our guests have insight into the industry, you want to know how to get in. I think what I heard was become a runway model. So
wait, there's some truth to that, because the executive that put me up for that show, the network executive that suggested me for the show, the showrunners did not want to interview me. They had already decided who it was going to be,
right.
And so. He did tell them, she used to be a runway model, and they said, we'll meet her. But I will say this, I went in, I got hired, within 24 hours because they gave me a sample segment. I finished it in 3 hours and sent it back. They said it had been a week assignment, which I didn't realize, so they hired me.
Right.
The next season I was a consulting producer, and the next season I was the only one that came back, so I actually stayed with them for a couple seasons. So whatever brought me in the door, doors open in a lot of ways. The question is, when you walk through, are you ready to stay on the other side of the door?
Right. Do you have those skills?
Yes.
So talk to us about cookies a little bit.
Sure. So there's an expression. I don't know if you have heard this as I look at Kirk, are you familiar with this? There's an expression that it comes from childhood, but that I've used quite frequently working in the industry, and that is kind of, what is that navigational facility when you are the only chip in the cookie? And a lot of us have been the only chip in the cookie, the only person of color in a particular workspace, or certainly in a management position or a position of power in decision making, or the only woman, or the only whatever, LGBT person, disabled person. There are so many different communities that have such limited access. And so there's kind of two sides to the conversation around inclusivity in Hollywood. And the first one is you do need voices in the room. So who are those people who are going to navigate and scale and really kind of survive the constant nonsense that goes with it? Because there's a lot of nonsense. But that is, I believe, in my career, greatly outweighed by the opportunities to change the narrative. Literally change the narrative because you give notes, and then figuratively do so.
Right.
And then the separate one is now we've had this extraordinary explosion of access because platforms and software and other technology means it's possible for all the means of production to be in anyone's hands. And I'm a huge advocate of that. But I'm still old school. And so when I talk about you don't have to go through the system, but if you're going to do it independently, be very mindful that what the system is charging you for is that beautiful infrastructure that gets you in front of the audience. Mm-hmm. And so you're not just here to create content when you do it on your own, right? You're here to create content and become the marketing person and the salesperson, right? And the person and the standards and practices person and all of that, that someone else is, taking a whole lot of responsibility for. But you're also the quality control person. And I used to say when I was first teaching screenwriting many, many years ago at UCLA Extension, before I even wrote the book about it, when I was first teaching screenwriting and story structure at UCLA Extension Writers Program, I would say, a typewriter doesn't make you a screenwriter, it makes you a typist, right? And Final Draft doesn't make you a screenwriter, it makes you a beautifully formatted typist, right? It's like, because it's such a gorgeous software. And so we still have a responsibility to our craft, and because I'm old school, I would say if you're coming forward as a woman or a person of color, or any other marginalized group in mainstream Hollywood, then you've got to have that 200% rule going. You've got to come in twice as strong. There is no space for mediocrity. Forget trying to convince anyone in the mainstream to see your work. We are still these massive consumers of content, and we are ruthless, and we now have Twitter to completely take you to pieces, right? If you don't come correct with your content. So I went way off the cookie analogy, but there we go.
No, I think you nailed it.
Did I? I'm really hungry.
So I have a couple of things. I mean, the first one is Darren and I were talking about this before because we were doing a little research, and so I saw that you worked on Star Search.
I did.
And so when Darren was like, but I think it was the Arsenio Hall one.
It was.
Like, the Arsenio Hall one, and this is so random, but there was who is now, I guess she's older now and she's still a singer, but there was a girl on there, Tiffany Evans, and she sang all, every time she sang a song from Dreamgirls, I'm changing, she sang And I'm Telling You, and she was 7, but she looked like she was about 40. She's a little old lady, but she won the major prize, and I just thought that was so. I was like, "Whoa!" She worked on that show because I just randomly remember Tiffany Evans.
That's amazing. Now I'm going to Google her. There were some amazing young stars on that show, but I didn't work with Tiffany.
Okay, yeah. That is what I remember from that experience. Just made me think about that.
Yes.
But I do also want to talk about, because Darren, I mess with Darren all the time about, my lack of technical knowledge and his wealth of technical knowledge. And you guys were going back and, we were talking, before we started recording.
We were nerding out.
We were geeking out, yes.
And I do want to talk about, that transition, into getting into the technology part of the business. What led you there, and how has it been since what's been going on with that?
Sure. Now, to be really honest, I have been a geek my entire life. So, for fun,
right.
I would do logic problems. I taught myself to code. I've always been extremely nerdy. But the real thing is I'm an optimizer.
Okay.
And so any situation I'm placed in, I'm always trying to figure out how can we do this faster? How can we do it cheaper? How can we do it smarter? How can we do it easier? So there's never kind of a limit to there's never a limit. I'm making a geeky symbol. There's never a limit to are we there yet, right? I'm someone that lean was designed for. I want to iterate and iterate and iterate because there's never a perfect, there's never an end. And so even in earlier parts of my career, I taught for a year. I taught when I was doing children's television. I taught between seasons. And even if like I did a PE class, but it's like we have to do locker room check-in, and they were doing it on paper, and I was so aggravated, and I wrote a program so it would pop up a dialogue box, and you could type it in, it would randomly distribute a lock or capture their name, and the teachers were like, "What is wrong with you?" Yeah, or this is, oh my God, many years ago on another show. It was a segment-based show, and they were traveling and field producing, and there were so many teams going out at the same time, and they couldn't turn their scripts around in time. So I was just like, okay, give me the transcripts, and I'll write a program where I could take the transcripts, and they can actually go in and tag the transcripts out, and then it will spit out the stuff that's not tagged, sort it, turn it into a script, segment it, turn it into a table. And so in about 5 minutes, I would have this 2-column script from the transcript based on my selects instead of doing it manually. So there's always been this fascination with technology.
Right.
But there was never a facility with it until 2006 and 2007 when shell platforms came up, when things like MySpace came up. Facebook wasn't, open to people my age yet. But where you were seeing these platforms that were just blank tools that you could come in and say, or what was the social network where you could make social networks?
Yeah.
Ming, Ding, Bing.
Ming. I think that's right.
Ning.
Ning, ning, ning. Yeah. Ning.
Oh, God. So that was the first time you didn't have to build it from scratch. I could use these kind of out-of-the-box cloud-based solutions to solve things. And then that irritated me because I wanted to do it better. And I finally went on to the Stanford listserv and said, this is what I want to do, and I need a CTO. And literally posted, this is ridiculous, in 2007. Is there anyone out there who can help me build, software? And, like 400,000 responses. But I found my CTO. Right. I did. We met 2 years after we built both of the applications. We actually never sat in a room together. We built it all using Skype and shared screens.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Very cool. I work remotely on every project, so I never understand, when work makes me fly to Ohio or whatever. There's no reason for me to spend 12 hours in the sky for this trip.
So you're talking about Ohio, Australia?
Well, 6 there and 6 back. And I'm kidding. No, but I get sent to the East Coast a lot, and it's always like, you fly out, then there's the 3-hour time difference, and then you got to be up the next morning at what amounts to 6 a.m. for you to NB sharp and whatever.
Well, and I worked with Ukrainian network last year, or Russian network last year. I've never been to the Ukraine or to Russia, and I don't speak those languages, and everything is possible now with technology.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So tell us more about that. So a couple of your big consulting projects recently have been this launch of new broadcast networks internationally,
or scaling, in those instances, scaling.
Okay. What kind of challenges does one encounter in that sort of thing, and what do they expect from you as a consultant?
Well, I think the interesting thing is it's a similar challenge to work that I've done working with networks and production companies and studios here in the U.S. Except for the point is they actually actively want to adopt the U.S. model. And so there's less friction when you're going internationally because they really want to know what's the streamlined experience. Whereas here, even though there really is an established U.S. model, people fight if it's uncomfortable, or if they have to learn something new, or if it's different from the way we've always done things, etc. So it was much easier to kind of take my bag of tricks and say, all right, let's talk about creating a culture, let's talk about putting workflows together, and let's put documentation and other technology tools together to make that workflow easier. And they would say, sure. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I set this up. Let's talk through this. It was very low friction until we started talking about content and best practices for content. And that's going to be, dukes up no matter what language you're in. People are very protective of content.
Yes. That's the sort of why they're doing it, so they can tell their stories their way.
They're not excited about workflow like I am.
Well, so that segues into one of our essay questions. We ask an essay question of our guests each time.
Because we also were came through the programs. So, and there are always those questions. And so now we're like, let's torture our guests with these similar questions.
So the first one is, how do you feel that your background affects the kinds of stories that you choose to tell or have chosen to tell over the years?
Sure. I'm tremendously committed to putting people like me on the screen because people still think I'm an anomaly, right? People, still are. I always tell the story when I taught those two between those two seasons, and I was actually a health and PE teacher for one of those stints, and I came in sweats to work every day, and I would wear my Stanford sweats because it's truly all you own when you're in your 20s. You just graduated from Stanford, and on a regular basis, to the dismay of my laughing colleagues, someone would ask me, "Oh, who do you know that went to Stanford?" And I would say my freshman roommate.
Right.
But there is still a very strong belief that people of color that are extremely educated and are world travelers and multilingual and geeks are some odd kind of unicorn or extremely kind of right, or extremely strong powerful women. So images that I was so used to growing up because my parents, I now understand, artificially seeded them into my reading and television and movie viewing, I really feel are still missing from the landscape. So whether I was doing doc TV and saying, okay, we're going to interview a bunch of professors, I'm going to go online and I'm going to take a look and make sure that I'm putting diverse, academics in front as experts. So just really putting what I believe is a normal representation of America onto television was a huge standard for me, and I fought for it, for what was absolutely normal. And people who would say to me, well, there aren't black people that talk that way, and I would say, you are in a conversation with one. What am I? And then you was like, don't answer that.
That's fantastic. Right. So it sounds like maybe a little bit of that agenda that you wanted to make happen in the political career.
Absolutely.
Better make happen.
My agenda has not changed. I always tell people there's not something that you're supposed to do in life. There's someone you're supposed to be. And you're actually going to have to do a lot of things to become that person, right?
Love it.
And so the I've done a lot of right? But all of them have really been about, how do I kind of create this championship experience that I was so blessed to have growing up for as many people as possible, right? How do I normalize excellence for as many people as possible?
Very nice. So we'll save the second essay question for the end of the show.
Yeah.
But thank you for letting us get a chance to know you about it.
Yes, thank you.
Make sure you go over to the iTunes store and find us at Hollywood Inclusive. We need you to subscribe, rate us a 5, and continue listening. Yeah.
Welcome back. In segment 3, we are going to look at an article, a study, I don't know what to call it exactly, an exercise, I'll say an exercise, by USA Today, of all sources. They decided to take a look at the, 6 major networks, 5 major networks. How many do we have now? 5.
I don't know. I guess it's 5 because it's ABC, CBS, NBC, CW, which I think, and did I leave one out?
And Fox.
And Fox, right.
Because UPN and WB used to be 6,
right,
and they collapsed.
merged.
Yeah.
Right.
So they went through and they assigned a letter grade based on diversity, and I think they focused essentially on racial and ethnic. They didn't get into gender very much. They didn't get in. There's mentions here and there about other aspects
on camera, or they're also weighing in.
They're focusing on camera here,
and also. I think one thing in the article, so the title of the article is TV's Making Progress on Diversity, but it's motivated by money. And my thing was, like, okay, I mean, yes, of course it's motivated by money. I mean, to me, the article should be like, what took you so long, as opposed to like, there's a line in there that's something like the only color that matters is green.
I'm going to even take your statement to the next level. Yes, at last it's motivated by money. Because that's really what we're talking about. It goes back to that earlier comment saying, well, if it costs us $70 million, so be it. At least I didn't have to cast, authentically. The truth is when you've tried to explain year over year over year that these decisions are not motivated by money, when people say, well, they would do those, but the films don't do well. And you're like, no, the films are murdering. The films are making all types of money. The films always, recoup. And no one hears that because Hollywood isn't kind of moving by green. It's right. It's motivated by red, by blood, by your bond with your friend or your brother or whoever you want to take care of, the people you love to work with. So we're going to keep doing that. If we just had pure bottom line profit motive, I think we'd see more.
You would think, and I'll pull up your "Who was in the room" hashtag, which I'm going to start using all over, so that you're not the only one.
Maybe
using
you can trend it. I didn't work out.
But like, why is there not a simple pie chart? Here's your return on investment. There
is a pie chart. I mean, there's forget pie chart. There's like weekly updates and all the
there
trades.
has to have been some meetings where it was like, what should we concentrate on this year? By the way, here's a way to make more money. Like, there's a significantly greater return on investment simply by making sure that you have somebody in your show that everybody in the audience can associate with. Well, straightforward and simple.
Right, but I want to read this. I want to read you just a little bit of this because this is. I am gonna say it ignores me. It annoys me, but just it says when you have a country as diverse as ours, you just have to have programming that appeals to different groups. But the thing is that it's not like our country just became diverse in 2015. You know what I'm saying? Like this, it's hard for me to like take stuff like this seriously because, it says while TV executives are aware diversity is a hot button issue, their motives aren't entirely pure. We recognize pretty quickly that this is not about social good. This is about commerce. And
okay. I have got to jump in on, which is just two thoughts.
Go.
The first thing is how interesting to think that inclusive content is a way to appeal to different audiences, because when you're looking at shows like Empire, right, and you're seeing that is, that show's not the number one show, right, because it only appeals to black people. So there's still a bizarre filter being applied to diverse content means, women have to watch women's stuff. People of color will only watch their own communities. That's the first thing. So there's already a weird misunderstanding of how content actually plays, right? I think the hip hop industry could teach everyone about whether diverse content only appeals to people who look like you.
Exactly.
The second thing, which I've now forgotten, but was really something else. Wait, what was the second thing you said? Because I thought, it appeals to that it's not a social good.
Right.
It shouldn't be a social good. It's the point of inclusiveness is not to create some type of a benefit program for entertainment.
Exactly.
It's to be able to tell more stories, richer stories, complex stories.
Yeah.
That you can dip into so many more wells to draw from.
Right.
So that's
like I said, this article to me, I mean, outside of I'm not gonna say it didn't have to be written, but I just feel like it is very.
Who was in the editorial room?
Who was in the room?
That's too many characters. Like that. That's your entire tweet is the hashtag.
I do understand, and they brought up shows like Power and Empire and Pitch, and they brought up these shows, but I guess my
is Pitch getting any numbers?
I don't think that the numbers,
darling.
I don't think that the numbers are that great, but I really enjoy the show.
It's a good show?
Yeah, I enjoy the show. But like you said, I feel like, I again, if you look at, I think they did and I'm gonna sort of make up my own numbers here, but I remember they were doing black audiences, and they were they did Empire, Scandal, How to Get Away with Murder, and and I think Empire had the largest black audience out of all the shows. But if you look at shows like Scandal and they are very, very balanced, and so it's other people do watch shows that star different people that don't look like them. So
absolutely.
How about we just continue to do this? And again, our country is so diverse. I'm like, well, yeah, it was diverse 10 years ago, and it was diverse 10 years before that, and it was, you know what I mean? So it's I find it a little disingenuous. So yeah.
Yeah, I have a different theory. Excuse me. I have a different theory for why we're changing, right?
And
it actually could possibly bode well for our industry. It is not about whether or not we are putting, faces on camera that are reflective or behind the camera that are reflective, blah, blah, blah. We have watched now the technology industry apply an actual business model, not a let's have a boat party and make it rain model, which is basically the entertainment industry's model, right? Whatever makes us feel good because there's so much money to be made. So we watched the tech industry come in and completely dismantle the music industry by doing it by the numbers and by a profit model.
Right.
So when you say, well, you know, why aren't they doing it? We've never done this. We've never run this like a formal business. So when Apple came in and looked at all the opportunities and listened to the end user and then, you know, built hardware and then, you know, software and found their loss leaders and did everything and watched those numbers go, it didn't even take a decade. And the music industry as we know it and all of those, you know, cars and parties and the drinks, gone.
Yes.
And now the music industry is an algorithmic profit-making machine, right? So then the next thing that came in, because I saw Luke Cage pop up on screen there, is we looked at, you know, oh, ha, 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 Netflix, oh, you're going to mail DVDs. But these folks were visionaries, but I would also add this is a tech company, right?
Right.
And so the tech company came in and they had destroyed, you know, everything we understood about videos, DVDs, you know, retail. And when we're talking about forget algorithmic, you know, profit models. Now, even when you're putting content together at a Netflix, you're talking about based on what they're seeing from their data. This is the minute into episode 1 that we need to have, you know, a plot twist because they're so and look what happens. It works out great for Netflix, right? So they've completely wiped out Blockbuster and all the home video, you know, markets. And so as we're watching Netflix now go in, Amazon, as we're watching tech companies dive deeper into original content, but still do it as a tech company would, I think that maybe, and this is the part where it bodes well for us, we're going to say maybe we're not going to be the next dinosaurs that get taken out. Maybe we are going to have to adapt. So the problem is they think that Netflix is doing something amazing just because of Jessica Jones or Luke Cage or I don't know, you know, because of the casting, and not realizing no, they're doing business in an entirely different way. So we might lose again. Dun, dun, dun. And on that happy note,
I mean, what do I say after that?
Well, so to go back to the article for a second, who do you guys think? Kirk, I think you've read it, but who do you guys think out of the networks they gave the highest grade to?
I mean, I know it's ABC, so.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know who else could it be?
ABC is the obvious one, and this is where I'm kind of like, but who do you think they give the second one to?
And I would have said Fox, and I don't remember from the article, but that just would have been the next.
Why Fox?
Just because in thinking of the shows that they have, I would think that. Yeah, I mean, I would just think it would. If I had to do it, and this is not me remembering it, so I would say like it would be ABC. Fox, NBC, CBS, CW.
I would actually take another look at CW just because they had such a focus on female-oriented content for such a long time.
Yeah, and that's part of why
that's the thing in this. They only focus on racial.
I don't think.
And
I got you.
They kind of mentioned it, but
I
up
see.
top they just said when it comes to racial and ethnic diversity, they're particularly pointing out how like movies are way behind TV. And that was part of why they focused on TV. So yeah, we're in the right ballpark here. It goes ABC, they gave an A-, Fox a B+, and then everybody else gets a C. Or C, C-, C+, whatever.
Oh, okay.
And CW they had it as C+, but I think you're probably exactly right. You know, shows like The 100 or whatever, that doesn't necessarily count for the fact that, hey, I didn't notice that subtly all of the leaders are women. You know, stuff like
because
that.
they have a lot
that
of female-led content because they have My Crazy Ex-Girlfriend.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
They have Supergirl now. They have Jane the Virgin.
I'm guessing they don't get points for that because I would think they would not necessarily rate higher than a C, but they would rate higher than the other two networks at least in terms of that.
Possibly.
And then did you see who they gave the worst marks to?
It was CBS, right?
Yeah, CBS. They said 6 new shows with white male leads. That's their 2016 offerings.
I'm making a zipper sign across my mouth right now. I mean, I don't know that we could see this massive difference. You know, the other networks might have 5 new shows. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know that there's this massive difference, except for ABC. You know, because Steve McPherson came in all those years ago now, right? Unleashed Shonda Rhimes on the world, and it's just been inclusiveness and normalcy, you know, since.
Yeah, well, and this takes us to the second article we were going to talk about. This came out in Variety this week, and it's talking about the point of view of casting directors and how they're now under pressure to represent today's America. And the interesting anecdote they tell at the top of it is about how Shonda Rhimes was casting the character of Miranda Bailey at the beginning of the show. And she was quite insistent that Miranda Bailey was going to be a tiny female, blonde female. So she had Kristen Chenoweth in mind.
Oh, okay.
As Miranda Bailey, which, oh my gosh, different show if that's who that is.
Right, because Miranda Bailey and Chandra Wilson are two totally different people. So
Kristen Chenoweth and Chandra Wilson.
Yes, who did I say?
Yeah,
Miranda Bailey.
You said Miranda Bailey.
Yeah,
yes,
they are.
Yeah.
And then they happened to see a Chandra Wilson audition tape, and literally tape. It points out it was a VHS tape at the time.
Oh my word!
Right, and they went, "Whoops, that's Miranda Bailey right there." And you know,
and they fought for that because it's interesting that there would be an article about the pressure on casting directors, unless it's being cleared, the pressure on casting directors to take initiative and to fight for because it's not like they're making the final choice.
Well,
right?
no. So what it is now is that the article is sort of focusing on the fact that now casting directors are under pressure to make sure that, of course, a lot of the leads are, are going to be chosen by, depending on if it's a production company or if it's packaged and stuff like that. But like if you take, I worked on a show called 13 Reasons Why. It's on Netflix, and it's a teen show. And so the majority of the actors are all unknowns. Okay. And so, part of the discussion was, or part of the thing was, well, we want a school that looks like a high school that everyone would go to in America, and so we were trying to figure out, like, well, who are these characters? And of course there was already an established pilot there, but he didn't necessarily include any race or ethnicity. So my thing was, we have an opportunity here to really say, well, okay, as we develop these characters, or we can decide who they are, or we can decide who they are right now, and then move forward and making sure that they're culturally specific, they're ethnically specific. So to me, it gives you sort of a nice playing field. And so in seeing that, we saw so many different types of people for all those roles. That being said, it was not easy, and I do think that, like you said, our casting directors, do they have that much power? But I think that it's not that, because I do think it does start with the showrunner, and
ends with them, right?
Yeah, and it starts with the showrunner. But I also think that the showrunner is now saying, hey, or the executives are saying, hey, we have 13 roles, and we cannot have the top 4 people on on the call sheet be white male, and so I think that that's the pressure that they are feeling now. But I guess my thinking, a casting director should know actors, and they should know a lot of them, and you should just not only know one type of actor, or what I'm saying. Right. So like, if you feel pressured, then I think it's because part of the reason why is you weren't necessarily doing the job that you probably should have been doing for a long time, or you were working on projects where you didn't have to.
Hired to do,
right? Or you were working on projects where you didn't have to.
That's right. Because we know that to be the bulk of the industry.
Right.
I think what you did is so important, and that's for scripted and unscripted. When I talk about casting and kind of best practices to create normal casts, I just say, go through the script and remove everything. Remove gender, remove race, remove age, remove everything that doesn't inform the story, and then take that extra time to do those mixed groups, those reads, and see what you can discover, and really go after accomplished actors who can come in. It's like NTCP all those years ago, right, in New York, non-traditional casting project. And so they would, do things like, well, we're going to do a reading of Fences with an Asian family. And you could not wait because because it was going to influence it. But we don't know how it's going to influence it. And that's the beauty of what actors, can bring. I mean, I'm a producer. I love directors. Writers matter. But we always kind of underestimate what an extraordinary actor is going to bring to the character when we're still in this development space.
Right.
Instead of bringing them into the development space and say, let's read this with a bunch of mixed, casts and see what we find.
Darren and I, we've talked about this before because I'm of two minds. Like, if I feel like if a character's gender, race, or gender we usually always point out in the script, but if their race or their ethnicity or their culture is specific to the storytelling, then it needs to be there. But then if it's just a guy who's a librarian, then let's see who's the best librarian. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I'm going to add gender to that because we can think of so many movies where the role ultimately went to a woman that was written for a man.
Right.
So that's why I say just take them out unless it is driving story. Right, unless it is driving story.
That's
just
what happened with Whoopi Goldberg, right?
Absolutely.
Jumping Jack Flash.
Yes.
It was, I remember it. Okay.
Or bigger, Sigourney Weaver.
Alien.
That was Alien was definitely written for
I
a
didn't
man.
know that. Nice.
Nice.
Hello, listener. You know who has 2 thumbs and loves a little glass of wine with dinner? This guy. Well, if you're like me, you could go to the California Wine Club and have wine delivered to your door. No more remembering to stop at the store to pick up a bottle of wine to go with dinner. Have it show up. Absolutely. And if you go to our website, click on ads, click on the banner ad for California Wine Club, you can get half off your first 3 months of membership. All right, so I'm happy to say that the 2016 political race, the presidential race, is almost over.
Almost.
We can almost stop hearing about it.
Vote.
But we want to talk a little bit about political endorsements because there were a couple that happened this week from celebrities. And
I won't say both of them are about endorsements, but they're both political. So here's the thing. So Lil Wayne did an interview with, is it with 2020? I want to make sure I know who he did this interview with. Lil Wayne did an interview and he was promoting his book called Gone to November about his 8-month stint in jail. And so they asked him about the Black Lives Matter movement. And Lil Wayne said that he did not connect with the Black Lives Matter movement. He said, I don't feel connected to a damn thing that ain't got nothing to do with me. My life matters, especially to my bitches. So that was
so beautiful.
Isn't that poetic?
Yes. Wow.
So that's what Lil Wayne had to say because he was like, I'm young and I'm rich and I'm black, so of course.
So America's fine.
America's fine. And he said something like this a couple of months back on Fox Sports about how racism doesn't exist because he's rich. So because he's rich, racism does not exist. And so my main thing is I was bothered because I kept hearing this all day. I saw it on the news. This was on CNN and this was on the whatever the network news was on, and it was on Twitter and Facebook. And my thing is, I was like, does anybody really give a damn about what Lil Wayne thinks about politics? But I did a little research, and Lil Wayne, in 2007, Lil Wayne did an interview about the President Obama and Mitt Romney election at the time, and he was talking about he couldn't vote because he had gone to jail for a gun charge, so he's a felon, so he could not vote. But he was talking about how he was still watching the election, how he was still really into politics, and how he was really keeping up with it. Now, this was in 2007, so now in 2016, he's like, he ended the interview like, I'm upset. I don't talk about politics. But you have. My main thing is I don't care what Lil Wayne has to say about politics ever, because anybody who has like, crystal balls in their mouth, I just do not give a shit what he has to say. And then, Susan Sarandon announced that she was endorsing Jill Stein today as well. And I guess my question is like, it's not necessarily do political endorsements matter, but I mean, maybe that is the question. I guess no, there's no celebrity that could sway me either way to vote for anybody. I'm going to vote based on, but do you think
unless
that,
they had a rational argument to share.
Well, right. Well, I mean, but it
much like any person could do.
Yeah. I want to just make sure that we bring who was in the room into every single segment, because the real question for me is not whether or not Lil Wayne has flipped or flopped or took so much blowback, from 2007 that he's just refusing to talk politics again. The real question is, we are really watching craziness happening right now with the Dakota Pipeline, the Standing Rock Sioux, like none of which has made it into a segment of those networks, but we're seeing, round the clock cycling of Lil Wayne's quotes. So who's in the room deciding what is mission critical coverage and what is just we're going to not talk about for another day?
Right. Well, and like I said, I mean, I guess I don't care what Lil Wayne has to say, but I also don't care about what Susan Sarandon has to say either. And that's nothing. That's
a two
nothing
for two.
Against either of them. It wouldn't sway me either way. I'm gonna read and do the stuff that I guess you should do when you're trying to make an informed decision.
We've talked about this on the show before a little bit with Colin Kaepernick and the degree to which he should or shouldn't be using his soapbox to influence minds, and how his simple action has had kind of ripples.
Right.
How's that different? I guess, just to hold you to your.
I guess, but I think the difference is that. Wait, go ahead, and I may piggyback.
That was, by the way, a rhetorical question.
I mean,
because it's really different. It's quite different. Colin Kaepernick is taking a stand to help people. And Lil Wayne is not taking a stand that for something people are dying, and Colin Kaepernick is trying to stop that from happening.
Well, so okay,
so that's it's apples and oranges.
And I guess and my thing is, and also it's not like Colin Kaepernick was like the biggest star at the time of this. Like when this got noticed, Colin Kaepernick wasn't even the starting quarterback.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I'm not saying that he's a celebrity or not a celebrity. I just feel that. Again, even if Colin Kaepernick was like, I'm for her, that wouldn't make me vote for Hillary because Colin Kaepernick said it. You know what I'm saying? Right. But I do but I feel like what he's doing is positive, and I feel like that Lil Wayne clip that is circulating everywhere before we actually see the full interview, to me is it's irresponsible. I think it's intentional, and it's like, oh, let me find one of the biggest he ain't that big no more, but anyway, let me find one of the most popular rappers, and then have him say something that is very antithetical to what a lot of black people feel, and now let's put that on repeat, because then like the Trump supporters, if you go look on Twitter, jumped right on there. Lil Wayne doesn't like Black Lives Matter either, blah blah blah. And it's like, shut up.
I mean, if I want to play devil's advocate, the kernel of wisdom in what he was saying was like, it doesn't need a name. Stop killing people. So there was a tiny nugget in what he was saying where he had some sort of
You dug under so much coal to find that nugget.
Right. Well, and that's not the part that's on the news cycle.
That's right. That's not
right.
So, but what's interesting is that would then kind of align him to the point of what Colin Kaepernick is doing, which is calling attention to this, rash and this injustice in the killing of unarmed people of color. And so standing up against injustice is completely not in the same conversation as I'm endorsing a candidate. Right. This is like people are dying and I have to speak out against it. This is my personal preference about something.
Right.
I'm not going to say, this I think is mission critical, that we all speak out against injustice. I too am not that moved by whether a celebrity or anyone else endorses a candidate.
Right.
But I don't think that that's a comparative.
I've never understood
experience.
endorsements at all.
I do not understand them. I don't.
It makes sense if it's your union. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Individual
On
endorsements
behalf of
is like,
people
wow,
who
really?
work this job or who, like here it matters for those of us in our industry.
Right.
But yeah, exactly. Some reality TV star says they think this. Shut up.
Wowzer, yes.
But who was in the room? Who was in the room? It was people who, we have a news media driven by conflict because that sells detergent.
Right.
So.
Well, and we also, to your point, we also don't necessarily have a cultural value of I'm going to read this and I'm going to make my decision. People really do appreciate kind of fast food decision making, and so even though we may not be the target audience for such endorsements, I would bet that they're retweeted to death. As validation.
I'm sure they are. I mean, that's why they're done. I mean, clearly it's. I guess it's meaningful in some way because otherwise they would not do them. But I mean, I just feel like most people.
But
in
on
this
November
country,
1st, November 2nd, like Susan Sarandon. Oh, good. Now I finally know who I'm going to vote for.
Right, but there still are undecided people.
Oh, of course
Somehow there are still undecided people in this campaign.
Okay.
And they're just waiting for their favorite movie star to tell them.
Exactly.
Hi, audience member. There's something I asked you to do and you haven't done it yet. Going to the iTunes store and giving Hollywood Inclusive 5-star rating and leaving a little comment. Subscribe even. That's not so much to ask, is it? You're probably thinking, yeah, I should definitely do that at the end of the show. No. You should do it now. Pause this podcast, go over to the iTunes store, and give us 5 stars. It is so important. We wouldn't be bothering you if it didn't matter, I promise. Please, pretty please. If you enjoy what we're doing, if you support what we're trying to accomplish with this podcast, please head over to the iTunes store and give Hollywood Inclusive 5 stars. All right, last segment of the day.
Hooray for Hollywood.
Let's end it on a positive. We're going to talk today about, this was mentioned on therap.com, and the headline is, this Blackish Writer's Assistant app is finally getting Hollywood to stop wasting paper.
Yay.
So if you know anything about the production process, you know that there are like 1,000 drafts of every script, and then that is then distributed to the entire production of 75 to 200 people depending on the scale, and then they reprint those and reprint those and reprint those.
Yeah, so if you're not familiar with the process, just in case, each one has its own color for the cover sheet.
Yes.
So you'll go through the normal colors, and then you'll get into the weird colors, and then you'll wind up at like double mauve. Depending on how many rewrites have gone through in a production.
Everyone should be fired if you make it to double ball.
Yeah.
I want to say he was a script coordinator. His name is on Blackish at the time. His name is Steve Bartolo. He's now the CEO of Scriptation, which is an iPad app that will sort of get rid of the paper process, and it allows you to be able to transfer notes from script to script and update to update. So that launched in May, and so the new thing that's going on now with it is that it's also going to be a way for now actors to be able to solely pull their specific lines off of the script so that they can also see that as well.
Yeah, which is the first thing an actor does is take out the highlighter and
Absolutely.
and ignore everybody else's and just highlight anything that applies to them. And this will make that process automatic within a script. So that's something special too.
And in the article, Kenya Barris, he mentions, he was like, when you think about it and think about the amount of printing and paper that's being used, he was like, if you bought everybody in production an iPad and an app, you'd save far more money in the long run in using it. So I just thought
they're using so much paper that those reams of paper cost more than everyone getting their own new iPad at the beginning of the production.
It's terrifying.
That's amazing.
Just how much paper it is. And so I just thought it was cool. I think it's really neat and useful.
It's very cool. And it's also cool that when we have somebody on the show with a technology background, it kind of speaks to what you were talking about with Netflix, because it mentions in there that as he was developing the app, he went to some of these different showrunners, and they were like, "Yeah, I would love that as long as it can handle notes."
Well, I mean, my first thought, I'm wondering how it integrates with Final Draft, because that would be, since all the scripts are being written on an existing software, that to me is like my little geeky CEO self is like, wow, how does that sale happen, right? Is that the exit strategy? The other thing is, when I created Showstarter, the scheduling and budgeting, plus software in 2007, it was cloud-based, and it integrated your schedule, your budget, and your cash flow, so you could, do them all together one time and not on 3 different software and print all the paper out. And what everyone said when we were first testing is, well, wait a minute, what about when I don't have access to the internet? And I said, no, you're always going to have access to the internet. That's over. Like, it's all the time. And people would be like, and like, pshaw, right? So it's so extraordinary. There are so many amazing apps in production now. And what you can do, the studio on your mobile phone or on your tablet, is so incredible. But now, I mean, this isn't even 10 years, and that's how exponentially the entire infrastructure has shifted about how we manage our productions. So congratulations to him for sure.
Yeah.
And obviously to Kenya if he invested in it.
I'm not sure he did, but he's mentioned as one of the folks that gave some feedback. So there was that, like you're saying about Netflix, they went in, or the tech industry with music, they went in and figured out what users actually wanted, as opposed to what we talked about with Doctor Strange, where they didn't ask. And it bit them later. Yeah. So, this is one of the things that the technology industry is doing that the entertainment industry can learn from.
They do so well.
So be it. So that brings us to our final essay question of the day for you, DMA. Okay. As a thank you for joining us, we hit you with a
You want me to spit some rhymes? Because I'll do it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, if you could.
I don't think that's the right expression.
We'll do the question, and then if you could flow in your response, that'd be great.
Perfect.
So our other question is, if somebody got off the bus in town right now and they wanted your career, and they were hoping...
My current career?
Well...
Or my trajectory, the path I took.
Your trajectory.
Sure.
If they wanted to be like you when they grow up, 5-10 years from now to be doing some of the similar work, what advice would you give that person new to Hollywood today?
Truly, the first thing is to release the belief that you're on a career path that is defined by a job title. Nothing is more important than, there's the path that people have. They say, okay, I'm going to be a screenwriter. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write a script, then I'm going to sell that script, and then I'm going to be a screenwriter. And then 10 years later, I'm going to be a rich screenwriter. And then 20 years later, I'm going to be a famous screenwriter, right?
Right.
And then 50 years from now, I'll be, an Oscar-winning screenwriter, and there'll be like a look back, tribute. And there's this thought that you come into any career, forget entertainment, but, any career, but certainly in entertainment, to pursue a job title. Because if you work in this industry and only have one job title, man, you failed, right? You are really as limited as a human being can be. And are you serious, right? And so I would say you have to come in with an agenda. Right? And that agenda may have nothing to do with creative content or anything else, but you have to come in with a real sense of what is the way I want to use this platform to change the world, not my life, right? It's almost impossible not to make money in this industry if you work hard and you're not, a knucklehead.
Right.
So it's like, how can I find a beacon that informs my ability to choose from the many different opportunities that will come my way? That's the meta answer. The micro answer is stop trying to start at the top of the industry. Don't get off of the bus and try and figure out how to sell your own show or direct your first film.
Yes.
Right? I call that being an Everest boy. Like, you don't want to get airlifted to the top of Mount Everest because you'll be dead in 2 minutes from exposure. And right, there's no sharper to get you down the mountain. Like, you're just going to die, right? Even if someone dropped you into that position, you couldn't succeed. Have excitement about the journey. Right? Have excitement about whatever that is, your PA gig or your fellowship opportunity or your writer's assistant job, not just because you're going to learn things, but because you're going to meet the people who are going to take you the rest of the way, right? Don't come here and try and figure out what star you're going to meet, because that star has 30 years of responsibility and networking. Try and figure out these other 5 people that are sitting in this apartment with you eating ramen.
Right.
It's like, how are we going to hook each other up? Because, you know, every job I can think of touches back to a relationship from those early days at Disney, those early days at Kennedy Marshall, those early days, you know, producing, you know, documentary, and we all came up together. So look to your left, to your right, and figure out how the three of you guys are going to get there and enjoy the journey.
Very nice.
Very nice.
Wonderful
Love
advice. Thank you so much for joining us,
Thank you
DMA.
guys.
much
This
for
is
joining
so
us.
much fun.
It's been a
Great.
pleasure.
Been a
And the
pleasure.
gourmet spread, my goodness.
Cookies.
The cookies.
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to hear from all of you listening what you have to say about all the topics we talked about today.
Yes.
You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Digital Darren, which is spelled DERON for some reason.
I am at Kirkwright79, which is spelled like at Kirkwright79.
Yeah. My name's spelled normally. And DMA, how can people find you on the internet?
PlanetDMA.com, and of course at PlanetDMA on all the social networks.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. That's been
you.
another episode of Hollywood Inclusive. Good talk.
Good talk.